Welcome back to another video, guys. As always, it's your boy Wraith Hoops, and today we have to talk about the Utah Jazz, more specifically their point guard battle. Because last season, they did have Mike Conley as their starting point guard until he got traded away. Now, after that, you had Talen Horton-Tucker running the point guard spot, and while he was at one point the shining star that the Lakers thought would have been the diamond in the rough that they got, it just didn't end up panning out. So now you had a situation where he's not necessarily a prime distributor of the basketball like you would hope your point guard would be, and he falls more into the role of the Colin Sexton and the Jordan Clarksons, where they're score first, more so combo guard kind of guys. Make sure to smash that like button. Go ahead and subscribe if you're into the Jazz content or NBA content in general, because I'm going to be pumping out a lot more of it. And let's go ahead and get this thing rolling. Now, as I said in the very beginning, Talen Horton-Tucker was that guy for them at the end of last season. But considering where they ended up, things weren't exactly the most ideal. Now, they did end up getting Colin Sexton last season, but because of injury, he just wasn't that available. They also do have Jordan Clarkson, obviously, who was one of those guys that he's just a spark plug coming off the bench for you. He's going to score in a multitude of ways. He's not the greatest defender at the point guard position, or the shooting guard position, honestly, but he's going to make up for what he lacks in defense on the offensive side of the ball. So you can only knock him but so much as a player. Add to the mix Chris Dunn, and in the draft, Keontae George, and you have a very interesting camaraderie of players vying for that starting spot. To many people, you would assume that Colin Sexton would go ahead and just take that role, but it's not that simple, especially coming off an injury that makes you lose a multitude of games and just practices with the team. Now with a full offseason under his belt with that team, as well as for the other players getting a full offseason and training camp in, it seems like it's going to be completely wide open to whoever really wants to get it. The understanding is that Chris Dunn is expected to be the most prototypical point guard, so to speak, in the sense that he's not known as being a prolific scorer of the basketball, so he's more privy to passing. Admittedly, Colin Sexton doesn't have that as his strong suit, even though he is efficient as a scorer, as over the 5 seasons of his career so far, he's averaged 19 points on 46, 38, 82% shooting splits, which is actually pretty good, all things considered. Now, the issue is he tends to be a defensive liability, and he's not terrific when it comes to passing the rock. Admittedly, he does average 3.2 assists to 2.4 turnovers, which it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize isn't exactly a great trade-off. That being said, Chris Dunn, because he does not offer the ideal ability to have that 1-2 punch on the offensive side of the ball, like you saw back when they had Rudy Gobert holding down things on defense, but Donovan Mitchell on offense, you see that Colin Sexton kind of fits that Donovan Mitchell role a lot more, especially considering that you still have Jordan Clarkson on the floor with you. Chris Dunn is a very reliable piece to have on the floor, and considering that Talen Horton-Tucker got some good considerable minutes last season after Mike Conley got traded, as he was the original point guard for them, it's reasonable to assume that all these guys are definitely in the mix and will have a genuine opportunity to get it done. My money personally is on Colin Sexton. I've been a Colin Sexton fan since he was in Alabama, and honestly, even back when he was at Pebblebrook back in high school days. The issue with him is because he's not the tallest, he does have a solid frame. He plays the passing lanes well, but one-on-one, he tends to struggle. Talen Horton-Tucker is more reliable in that sense. Chris Dunn is similar to the Colin Sexton role, but he lacks the offensive punch and efficiency on that side of the ball to make up for the points that he gives up. Now, like I said, Jordan Clarkson provides a huge fill-up of points. Sometimes it's efficient, sometimes he has streaky games, but you generally know what you're getting out of him. Bar anything crazy happening, I still do expect him being that first guy to come off the bench just to provide you with that extra punch right in whenever you decide to make that first substitution if I'm the coach for the Jazz. Now, Keontae George last season in college did average 15, 4, and almost 3, but he's currently listed as a shooting guard, so it may less so apply to him because they're trying to find minutes for him elsewhere, but I do still expect him to be an impactful player. Would I be surprised if he starts? Not gonna lie, kind of, because to me, it feels like it's still Colin Sexton's position to lose. Even though Talen Horton-Tucker was decent enough at the role last season, I don't think that it would be hyperbole to say that Colin Sexton, when healthy, is simply just a better player at the game of basketball than Talen Horton-Tucker. Now, across 65 games last season, THT did average about 11 points, 3 boards, and 4 assists, but his field goal percentage was 42% and his 3-point percentage was 28.5%. So you can understand why I'm a little hesitant to sit there and say that he's even slightly hampered. Colin Sexton might be a better option than him, simply from an efficiency standpoint. Now, Chris Dunn isn't exactly the stellar person, as I said before, to go over it, but if they decide that they want to go with the more traditional point guard, he's the closest thing that they have on the roster because of his passing sense. I have belief that Colin Sexton will make those strides in the offseason to become a better point guard, more so than being a combo guard and a shooting player at the one spot. Because while it is nice to have a point guard that can fill up the role, obviously you think of the Currys, you think of the Kyries, you think of the Lukas, but those guys are also very proficient passers. Even though you might not think Kyrie is necessarily an elite passer, he makes the correct decisions when the ball is in his hands, and that's the difference between when you think of Kyrie Irving and you think of Colin Sexton. Both of them aren't exactly terrific defenders. You might say Colin Sexton gives more effort on that side of the ball simply because he's smaller and he has to make that name for himself. But at the same time, Kyrie makes the right passes when he needs to, and his turnover to assist ratio indicates that. With that being said, it'll be interesting to see how things play out this upcoming season, and I look forward to seeing how training camp plays out just to see who the starting guard is, especially at the one spot, considering that the 2 spot is now going to be locked down. The most interesting thing to see is going to be how they decide to fill out their rotation. Right now, the expectation is that Colin Sexton starts, Jordan Clarkson is that shooting guard, Lauri Markkanen runs the small forward, John Collins at the power forward, and Walker Kessler at the center position. To back them up, you do have Kelly Olynyk, Taylor Hendricks, and Talen Horton-Tucker at the small forward spot, Ochai at the shooting guard spot, and Chris Dunn as that second point guard. Now, they do have Keontae George running with the third unit, which isn't exactly the most expected thing, and then Chris Dunn kind of falls into the mix later on, and I don't necessarily love that, but when you do realize that they do have the opportunity to also run that shooting guard spot, you want to make sure you have a good duo. And while I said all of them are vying for the point guard spot, obviously in their system, the point guard gets to make the most decisions while they're on the floor. That being said, it's going to be very important to make sure you do have a point guard that is a willing passer and a capable passer. So ideally, you do want to go ahead and have Jordan Clarkson running that shooting guard spot because he is the least likely to improve in a passing sense standpoint, but he's also not a dead ball kind of guy in the sense that most people have of Kevin Porter Jr., for example. They expect him to shoot shots, not pass the rock. He just doesn't swing it. Now that works for Jordan Clarkson right now, and I expect to stay the same. With that being said, it makes sense that Colin Sexton will be that other guy that's going to sit beside him on the court. I don't necessarily love Chris Dunn's athleticism, even though I do trust his decision making. Him being fit in better at that secondary spot, maybe Talen Horton-Tucker, run some extra minutes up there as a point forward. It's just going to be a very interesting conundrum for them because Taylor Horton-Tucker is also surprisingly undersized to be put at the small forward spot, which I find interesting to see that that's where they currently have him listed. But it just should be interesting to see how things shake up for them. Now, my money, as I said before, is going to be on Colin Sexton. Seeing that he's healthy, seeing that he's back, I've seen a couple practice videos. It's going to be interesting to see how training camp plays out. But my money's on the 2 starters being as is currently listed on the depth chart. With that being said, let me hear you guys' thoughts in the comment section. Make sure to like this video, subscribe if you are a Jazz fan. As always, good morning, good evening, good night, no matter where you are on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning into this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.